All right, folks, thank you so much for joining. We may still have some other colleagues trickle in, but thank you for joining the Undergraduate Research Opportunity Program Mentor Orientation. For some of you, we recognize some familiar names, so thank you for always coming back. We must be blowing your minds because you keep coming back for every orientation, so thank you for being a regular. For those that are new, we hope this information will be helpful for you as you continue to work with your research mentees or mentee singular. So really excited to see everyone here. We've got a jam-packed schedule, and one thing I just want to convey is the session is being recorded. For an optimal experience, please make sure you mute yourself unless invited to speak, so we're not all colliding over each other with our voices. We do like to acknowledge the land that feeds and sustains us. This land is a traditional and ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshu, and Ute tribes, and the University of Utah recognizes and respects the enduring relationship that exists between many Indigenous peoples and the traditional homelands. We respect the sovereign relationship between tribes, states, and the federal government, and affirm our university's commitment to partner with Native nations and urban Indian communities through research, education, and community outreach. My name is Dr. Annie Isabel Fukushima. I'm the Associate Dean of Undergraduate Studies. I also have two titles, so you also will see I'm also the Director of the Office of Undergraduate Research. I'm joined by Cindy, who I'm going to invite Cindy to go ahead and introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cindy Greaves. I'm the Associate Director in the office. I manage the UROP program. I'm sure that I've emailed most of you, so welcome to our orientation today. Please reach out with any questions that you have regarding the program at any time.
Yeah, so if Cindy sends you an email, it's probably important. So we highly encourage you to just check it out, take a quick look at it to see if it requires a timely response. You will be receiving regular communications from Cindy, and she is also the reason why your students get paid. So please, round of applause for Cindy for all the wonderful work she does to support our scholars. We also don't do this work alone. We have other members of our team who you will probably interact with if you've not interacted with before. Shelley Parker, our events manager, Angie Leva, our academic program coordinator, Bradney DeBoer, our outreach coordinator, and Sarah Cody, our academic program coordinator. We also hire undergraduate research leaders to work with the office. An overview of what we're going to go over today is we're going to talk about the overview of the Office of Undergraduate Research and research opportunities. We're also going to talk about supporting mentoring relationships and research. We're going to then go into UROP mentor and mentee expectations, as well as new funding and award opportunities. We'll talk a little bit about that towards the end of the presentation. That will include opportunities to collaborate with the office and some things you should know. If there's time for discussion, we'll also leave it open and also remain, if the meeting ends a little early, we'll remain to answer any questions that you may have that are individual to you. So just a little bit overview of the Office of Undergraduate Research and Undergraduate Research. As you know, that the Office of Undergraduate Research is housed in undergraduate studies, and we are committed to supporting students from admission to graduation, that those students are provided an exceptional educational experience. And as you all know, undergraduate research is part of that commitment. It's oftentimes referred to as HIPS or a high impact practice. And so we just know that undergraduate research is really a part of, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of that data so you can see that there really is evidence that shows that when students participate in research, they are more likely to be retained towards graduation. And what we know about undergraduate research is just, in case we have different definitions, it's an inquiry or investigation or research-based activity conducted by an undergraduate student that makes an original intellectual or creative contribution to the discipline and or to understanding it. And so some of the things that many of you are participating and supporting undergraduates, they may be part of your research teams working on your projects, or they may be embarking on their individual projects. And so there's a range of that. And we do that through a mission where we truly believe at the Office of Undergraduate Research that our students are successful because of the collaborations they have with faculty. And so we really are committed to student and faculty collaborations. We know that some of the research teams and mentoring also are with graduate students. And so we also support that. And so we just want to thank you all for your commitment to supporting the Office of Undergraduate Research with that. And so we support student success through research, but we can't do the work without all of you. We really do need our mentors to support the research enterprise. And that when our mentors are doing that, students are generating and sharing knowledge, participating in discovery and innovation. And they are also, and we also promote education through fostering mentoring relationships. And so I will talk a little bit about some things here that might hopefully help you all with your jobs. Our goal is to help you be effective at your work at mentoring students. But some of the things that just an overview of what the office does is that we generally support faculty and student collaborations. You'll see that through some of our research database, as well as our faculty mentor, find a mentor page, as well as we support education and outreach. Our education is more of education beyond the classroom. And so we're not trying to replace the work that our faculty and instructors do. Our goal is to supplement it. We also have grants and awards because we know that research recognition is an integral part of the research enterprise. Our advising is research advising. So just so you know, we do not do academic advising. We provide research advising. That looks more like research coaching, as well as recognition through our award ceremony. But we know that research is a public good and that you all are part of that. And so we just want to thank you. When our students participate in research, they really do have fond memories of the institution, whether you are connecting with them just to connect them to somebody else, or really are taking them under your wing as their as they are your mentees. You are the mentor. And so our students are solving societal problems and they become ambassadors of the institution because of the experience that you provide them. And so we just really want to thank you for really giving them that high quality and positive experience, knowing that sometimes research is hard. And so positive can include those really important things such as hard work. We also know that undergraduate research matters, and we're going to share some of the data because our students are more likely to be retained towards graduation. It supports diverse students when they participate in research. It also helps impact our students with their career decisions and post-graduation decisions. And they really do develop some fundamental skills because of the work that you all are doing. Some of the mentoring that you all are doing is scaffolding. And so again, while we are doing education beyond the classroom through our education series, a lot of the mentoring that you are doing is really a part of the teaching process. And so you are supporting students by mentoring them, teaching them to think like a research, helping to develop those metacognition skills, creating a sense of belonging to the institution, to the research enterprise, to your discipline. You scaffold experiences by looking at their timelines. We'll talk a little bit about that later, and by supporting their research process. And all of that stuff is part of research and teaching. And so some of the things that we really hope you are doing is that you are not hiding your mentoring under your service, that you really are putting it under your teaching in your CV, because this is really part of that aspect, because when you are mentoring, you are teaching. And if you are publishing and producing presentations with your mentees, that you are including them in your CV under research. And so really, we just see the tie between research and teaching, and many of you we know also see that. And so just want to thank you all for participating in that. I think before we get into a little bit more details, is I would love to just take a moment to invite each of you to use a chat feature to share how many times have you mentored UROP scholars, just so we can get a sense of the Zoom room. And feel free to say your department too, if you want to introduce yourself and say, hey, I'm with this department, because we may not know who, folks may not know who you are. We know who you are, but you may not know who each other is. So folks can use the chat feature to introduce yourself and how many times you've mentored a UROP scholar. Thank you. One time is great. It starts with one time. We look forward to many more. Oh, wow. Hey, thanks, Rhonda, for your 5-time mentoring. Amy, who's counting at 10? Yeah, Matt's done it quite a bit too. Thank you so much. Great. So we have some folks who are a little bit earlier in your mentoring with the UROP program, and we've got some veterans who have been doing it for multiple times. So I just want to thank you all. Wonderful. So we've got some veterans and some earlier folks in the room. Thank you all for entertaining the question. We love knowing a little bit about how often we could probably pull the report. Cindy already knows that internally, but it just helps you to see who else is in the room and how often folks are mentoring. So thank you all. All right. So before we go and move forward into some of our more details, if folks could share some questions that you hope you get answered today. So can you please just go ahead and use the chat feature, or you can unmute yourself and go ahead and just verbalize your question of something you'd like us to make sure we talk about in this orientation. So if folks can just, if you have any specific questions that you hope we answer, let's just give you a 30 seconds to think about it. And you can either direct the question directly to me or share it with everyone. Yeah, great. We're going to get to the hours question. Great. Yeah, that's a long time ago, Adriana. We've definitely changed our content. Thank you for coming back, though. All right. Okay. And if as I'm talking through some things, if questions come up, feel free to use the chat feature. And Cindy will flag it for me if she feels like as I'm talking about something, it's something I should probably address then make you wait until the very end. So Cindy, my co-facilitator for today, mostly you'll be hearing from me, but Cindy is also boss. You'll hear a lot from her through other contexts too. So we'll talk more about the logistics and that. So that sounds good. So let's just chat. Okay, we'll get to some of these questions. Thank you for that question. Yeah, we'll kind of circle back to that. Cindy, can you make sure when I talk about the pay, all that we talk specifically about that? And then resources available. Yes, we'll keep talking about that. Okay, great. So, just so there's a lot of diversities that we are supporting because we want to make sure that all students are supported at the University of Utah. And you can't do that without supporting diverse students. This spring cycle, we are supporting 201 scholars in general, Europe and Wilkes. And here you can see some of the distribution. Our bigger colleges like engineering, science, and social behavioral sciences are still the heavyweights of having more students selected. But hey, don't rule out our smaller colleges. They are not doing so bad themselves. And so this is how the distribution looks. If folks have any questions, we can always chat more about that. But as you know, I'll talk a little bit more about the process. As a reminder, if you're not as familiar about that, we'll go over that as well so you can understand how those numbers land where they land. But generally since 2015, so we're being cumulative here. We can break it down year by year, but just going to tell you cumulatively over the years is 20% of our students are first generation, 37% Pell eligible, 27% transfers from SLIC. Their GPA tends to be overall 3.65. Approximately 67%, that is so much higher than the University of Utah rate, graduate in 4 years, and 94% graduate in 6 years. And this rate actually improved from the last presentation as well. And since since 2015, we have supported 6,676 students. So we really are committed to supporting many students. And so one of the things you are familiar with, though, is that so we are supporting those diverse students. How do we get them? They apply. You're all familiar with Info Ready. And hey, I know some of you, Cindy's been loving getting those emails about how you can't access your student's application. Just know Cindy's working on it. She's doing her best to streamline the process so you don't have 4 or 5 emails affiliated with Info Ready. So her and Tyler are working on it. And that process we're hoping can be streamlined with a dual authentication system so you don't have so many emails, but that's going to take a little bit of time. And so they're working on it. And just know we hope to continue to improve the experience for when you access it. But I know that Cindy has said that Info Ready team has been really responsive to addressing those kind of multiple emails and all of that, as well as Cindy's very responsive to your inquiries. So I want to thank Cindy for handling all of that application process. So for now, UROP and SPUR are in Info Ready, and we're hoping to eventually have travel and small grants in there. But until we can get this multiple email stuff under control, we will then add our travel and small grants eventually to the system as well. Our process for decision making is that we receive applications. And so, Cindy, how many applications did you receive this past cycle? Oh,
So I think we, I don't have that number right off the bat, but I think it was closer to 300.
Yeah, so we received 300 applications just for this one semester. And then what happens is Cindy distributes it to our college contacts, who then distributes the application packets to reviewers. The reviewers score, they submit those scores directly to the office. And based on the scoring, then the office makes determinations of who to fund. We do look to see if there's any inconsistencies or issues with some of the feedback. And so just know that before decisions are made, we are making sure that there isn't bias happening, as well as we are making sure that that our reviewers are generally consistent. But one of the things we want to do is to honor that they are the experts in their field. So if they're reviewing science, we want to make sure that they're more likely to know more than us about it. Since I am a professor in ethnic studies, and while I love my science colleagues and collaborate with them, what do I know about the specifics? And so we want to make sure that review process stays within the college, and it's distributed by our college contact, who varies in their role from associate dean to assistant deans of that college. So folks who know the folks in the college. And so that's just a little bit our process. Before I go into supporting mentoring relationships, I just wanted to see if anyone had any specific questions about what I just talked about. Feel free to just unmute yourself and verbally ask.
Curious, and maybe I missed this, how many scholars were funded this round?
201. That's actually consistent with last fall, and actually it's been pretty consistent with generally our numbers and trends for the past couple of years. Yeah. So we're trying to keep it consistent, and part of it is in thanks to our partnerships. Yeah. Great questions. Other questions? All right. So we'll just kind of keep going through this. If other questions come up, just go ahead and ask them. But just know it is competitive. It's getting more increasingly competitive. And as I already know, every year I get asked, can you please increase the dollar amount that our students are paid? Can you increase the number of students our award? I would absolutely love to do that if our budget was increased. So if any of you have a connection and have not already, I've talked with folks in upper admin about growing our budget. And right now it is on the office to fundraise. And as you all have seen, we have a small fundraise that we've pushed out for our SPUR students. And so really, unless if we can get our individual fundraising going, right now, our budget, it doesn't look like it's going to grow for the next year or two, unless if we can see some changes. So And one asks, how do you expect the proposed budget cuts from the legislature will impact the budget? I don't think our budget will be impacted, to be honest. There is a high commitment both from the VPR's office. Our funds come from the VPR's office and the provost. And so our funds are state funds. And then we do probably are getting some of those indirects, but not as much as folks might think. And so what we know is that we probably won't be affected by budget cuts, to be honest. I think that where we may see those happening may look elsewhere, but our office, as far as I know, will not be affected. So thank you for that question. Yeah. But when the rest of the institution is affected, then that means our students are still affected. So if our mentors are affected, that still affects our students. So yeah. But that is another presentation and conversation. So we will continue on. All right, so let's talk. If you have more questions, just go ahead and drop it into the chat and we'll happy to pause for that. But here we really want to make sure that you are supported to support your mentees. And so one of the things I just want to invite you to first chat is that I would love if you could chat is what are some of the effective strategies you employ to mentor UROP scholars for those that are returning. For our first time folks, you're welcome to take a stab at this question of what you plan to do. But I'd love for our returning mentors, if you could share what are some of the strategies you employ to mentor UROP scholars. You can either use the chat feature or you can simply unmute yourselves. And as you think about that, I'm going to just answer Annie's question. Are UROP students eligible to apply for SPUR? The answer is yes. But you will receive feedback about how to mitigate bias during a different orientation for SPUR mentors. So inclusion in research team meetings, that's great. Yes, thank you, Rhonda, for that. And I hope folks are okay. I'm calling you by first names. We're all casual. Feel free to call me Annie. Yes. Any other one want to share some effective strategies you employ to mentor UROP scholars? So Divya says weekly lab meetings, as well with the UROP scholar meets all other students in the lab, exposes them to all types of ongoing research. Matt challenges them to on their own projects by encouraging them to write and submit abstracts at conferences. Yes. Yao establishes with a student early on that they're really leading the project and they're not just working with Yao. And then Matt also says, yes, lots of meetings. Hey, look at that, consistent. We meet with them a lot, huh? And a lot of supporting independence as well, right? Some part of that independence. And supporting them with that professional development, submitting to conference papers, as well as inclusion in publication. Yes, I do that as well. I really encourage folks to do that. If the student is working on a project where you are the PI, I encourage you to include them in the authorship of that project. All right. Yeah. And encouraging them to see opportunities for their research. So yeah, look at this, rock stars. Thank you so much, folks, for that. And so some of the things we just want to remind you of, and Cindy will share some of these slides. I have to make some tweaks, is that we will share these slides afterwards, but what we want to remind you of is to set clear expectations early on. We do share on our website under the resource page a template for a agreement that you can have your student sign with you. We also want to encourage you to revisit timelines. Students received a timesheet during the orientation with Cindy. They are not required to turn in that timesheet, but it does become helpful if there is a student who is not performing or you are not sure if they know how to really make sense of their hours. It gives them a space or something to ensure their accountability, whether it's to themselves or for you too. You all have regular scheduled out connections with your mentee in your teams. We encourage you to also set up that one-on-one time, and really do encourage you to discuss your communication style with your mentees. This is really important. I do this very early on since we don't all communicate the same way. Our communication styles are cultural. And so just want to share some of that. Then the other thing is, your mentee is a complex person. And so we just want to remind you that difference is always operating, that some of them are not familiar with the hidden curriculum in higher education. And so really, it is our responsibility as mentors to unveil that for them, not assume that they know what is expected of them. Even things such as writing an abstract, a student may have not really written an abstract for the kinds of things you are inviting them to do before. And so really giving them the tools, we have the education series where we unpack abstract writing, but really supporting them through that process and don't assume that they know. And that we know that research environments really matter. There's all kinds of difference operating in campus. Our students are interacting with other students, with staff, with research teams of one or two, and all of that. And so what we know is that that's impacting how they then arrive into our research environments. And so really want to encourage you to consider that and just know it's not just about the higher education environment, but literally their lives as people. They are bringing sometimes home with them to work. And so really, and sometimes it is really hard to separate those things. And so they are a complicated person just as we are a complicated person, people, right? We are complicated with complicated lives. And so just want to remind ourselves that they are complex. We know you know this, but some things to keep in mind. And that really to support your mentee is that we mentor up, right? And so really have the mentee take ownership of maintaining communication and effective communication, having those really open conversations of when do they bring stuff to you? If it's more urgent, how might they bring it up to you and elevate it to you? And that really you want to align expectations. You can go to that agreement, but really give them some feedback throughout so that they know that they are meeting benchmarks and expectations that you have, and not solely just arriving and assuming that they can do the thing that you've asked them to do, or that they think that they can do if it is an independent project that they are individually leading. We do want to encourage independence, have clear milestones, but really make explicit their goals. And really, I like to build out those really mini goals for my mentees so that they can really hit those big goals in really more, achievable chunks. Otherwise, it can feel overwhelming if you're really thinking about the end product. And that, there's other kinds of training. There is, some resources about thinking about mentoring on a continuum, thinking about proactive mentoring and mentoring up as well. Also think about ethics in research. I was just at the VPR conversation about a lot of their ethics stuff that they've got going on. And really it is on you as mentors to make sure that they are appropriately certified and trained to do ethical research in your particular field. And we know this varies by discipline and all of that. And so really include those trainings in your timeline of activities so that they know what they need to be doing. So some of the things is that Cindy does send a biweekly email check-in. And so if there are concerns that you aren't sure, like we don't need to escalate it, but you're just wanting to know if there's some resources, we do encourage you to reach out to the office. And if we know of some resources, we can share it with you. If it's an unfamiliar question or terrain that you are asking us, we can make sure to work with you to figure it out together, or maybe to also populate it in our education series if that's something appropriate in the future. And one of the things I really want to encourage, and so you've kind of thought through the like getting started and how you support those mentees early on. But one of the things to really re-emphasize is that you really should just assume that your mentee's starting with zero. And so how do you get them to where you need to get them to do the research that they are doing with you, whether it's on your project or the project that they have determined for themselves? And who else needs to support you and your team? And so really think about it as not just an individualized mentoring model, but a multi-level mentoring model. The office does provide research advising. So when students have questions about accessing and applying for resources, so that at the end, you're going to see we have an IRB lab, as well as we have Funding Fridays when they want to apply for things. Really see the office as part of your team that wants to support you in that mentoring process. The other thing is don't assume they know the terms. We love our jargon. We love our acronyms. And so just really, I always rephrase things because I don't want to assume that my students know and mentees know what I'm saying, that they may over time become versed in that language as well. Sometimes I also do a lot more writing because some of our students are visual learners, whether English is not their preferred language or they're just generally a visual learner. I do encourage you to share messy drafts, challenges, and strategies of success so they can see you as a person, that we didn't start off at that polished product called a grant, called a article, called a book, that it took us many efforts and many revisions and different steps to get there. And also reflect on how different shapes your field: race, gender, class, sexuality, and national origins. What are your strengths? What do you know? What could be strengthened? We're all always working across difference. And even as an ethnic studies scholar who I identify as a woman of color, just because I'm mentoring maybe some students who may identify as women of color as well, I should never assume that we have the same lived experience, because that is such a huge category of difference, right? And so just want to encourage us to always think across that difference. Some of the things I really want to encourage you to pay attention to, so when you're getting those biweekly invitations to update the office, is that you don't need to get, always be like, hey, they are late on this assignment. Like those details are really up to you. We don't need to be in your business. But one of the things we just want to encourage you is we're here to support you. And so some things you may want to consider paying attention to, and this is not an exhaustive list, is if a student isn't meeting deadlines, they're missing meetings, there's a lot of miscommunication that's happening, or frustration in the communication, or the work that is completed isn't meeting your expectation. For somebody at this stage of their academics, if you were to compare them to their equivalent to other undergraduates at this stage, or if the student is disclosing literal stress, difficulty sleeping, eating, or chronic medical realities. And so we'll share some resources afterwards, but please do flag for us if we can support you, connect you to resources, or connect your mentee to resources. Sometimes it helps to have an office reach out to the mentee and just, let them know that we're here to support them as well, and get them on track. Our goal is always to be educational for our students before we move towards, and it does happen where students have to withdraw from the UROP experience. We really want to help them know, not get there, but really if they have to get there, Cindy will work on with them. But before they get there, we really want to really do some mentoring and support of the student. I encourage you to do that, and we're here to support you. And so there are some resources for mental health. A reminder that you are mandated reporters for Title IX. You've all done your Title IX training. There is case management support with the Dean of Students. I regularly refer students to them, especially if students are bringing up stuff that I'm like, this is really outside of what I can support them within the research. I really want to make sure they are, as a person, supported. There's student success coaches, disability access and accommodation. There's also resources for students who are first generation, the Office of First Gen. And so there's a range of resources for students. So before we get into reminders and expectations, I just want to pause to see if there are any questions that are coming up for folks. Or Cindy, were there any questions that came up that I missed?
I think the questions are stuff that we're still going to cover moving
Okay, great.
forward.
Okay, great. So no questions yet. Oh, now sorry, that's weird time for the captioning to start. All right. Okay, so let's kind of go through some of the expectations and all of that fun stuff. And so there was a question about pay. Okay, so the UROP program, we pay them $1,200. It's a stipend for 120 hours of work during one semester. This is to do work with their faculty mentor, and in some cases, we do have some graduate students or postdocs who are mentoring. But generally, the bulk of our mentors are faculty. And so this is a stipend that the students paid. And as Cindy put in chat, they don't have to do time cards in Chronos. Literally, every other week during the regular pay cycle, the student receives their paycheck. Cindy's already gone through the I-9s and all those wonderful, exciting bureaucracies with your student. And so just know the office is taking care of paying them. And if they have other jobs on campus, Cindy has communicated with them of how to work that out with the office and all of that. But there were some questions about the inequities in pay and all of that. And so I think that was Yao's question. Was that, Cindy? Can you remind me where that question was? It was, that it kind of comes out to about $10 an hour, right? If you were to do that, where the department pays your students $15 and a half hour. Well, we're not telling you how you need to distribute these hours. This is all we can pay them is $1,200, and we estimate it for 120 hours. And that is a recommended. What we really don't want to see happening is a student is paid $1,200 and the faculty mentor is having the student work like 200 hours because that is not what's expected. And so I think, Cindy, do you want to kind of take a further stab at that kind of inequity that Yao is flagging?
Yeah, so sometimes we have mentors who will just stop the pay in their departments because they not only, I mean, they realize that this is a lower paying Europe, but they realize that this is a great experience the students are getting in our program. But also something that they might be able to do is do like a supplement. That would be something that they have to go through HR. And if they want it, like we're paying $10 an hour, if they wanted to pay them an additional $5 an hour, that is something that would be acceptable. But they do, again, they'd have to change the EPAF and the hiring that is already set. But we do want to remind faculty and mentors that students cannot get paid for the same work twice. So the hours that they're putting in on their UROP project, we are paying them. So you can also not pay them also. So if they're already working in your lab, we cannot double pay them for the same work. If you would like them to work additional hours than what they're doing on their UROP, or maybe you have them doing a different project, then that is fine. But it is illegal for us to pay them and for you to pay them for the same work. I don't know if that clears up anything, if anybody has any questions regarding that.
Yeah, do we want to pause for that? Any question?
Follow up on that.
Yes, go ahead.
So I guess my difficulty is this 120 hours, right? Because the Euro program asked me, do my student work at 120 hours? And I feel difficult to enforce that because the student only paid 1,200, right? Mm-hmm. Which corresponding to about 80 or 90 hours of work a week. So I guess my underlying question there, I don't know if it's legal for me to ask that, is it okay if my student only work at 80 hours a week and I still tell the UROP office that this is satisfactory? Because that is, in my mind, that is what the amount of hours the student are really being paid for. But it's okay if the UROP says that that's not okay. The student must work for 120 hours for the given amount of stipend. But it just create, like, even within my group, I have students who are being paid much higher than this. And if the difference is small, it might be okay. But 10 and 15 is really a big difference. And it's very difficult for me to navigate the situation, especially I have multiple undergrad students coming from different funding sources.
Yeah, so I think to circle back though, Yao, is that I would suggest that if you have resources, is to supplement. You can do that per what Cindy said, and then you can always consult with her offline about that. And that could be one way of doing it to ensure there aren't inequities in your research team. And that would be one thing. Also, the other thing is to maybe then think about the different kind of work they might be doing then, because they are being paid less for a certain amount of hours. And so that we will defer to you as experts. We're not going to get into your like, how do you break it down by week and all of that. But really one of the things, it's about the research experience. And so we just don't want you to cut short the student though of having a full semester of research experience, knowing that this is just part-time. And so I hope that helps. Cindy, do you want to say anything to that as well?
I did want to say that. So if it comes down to it and the student is getting paid more in the lab, the student doesn't have to apply for our funding. Many of the programs that we have in our office, students are still allowed to participate in. And so if the funding does come to be an issue, then just don't have them apply for the funding part of it. But they can still do everything else that we offer the funded students.
Yeah, great. All right, so we can keep, if you have more specific questions, we can stay on after and we can make sure you are supported. I'm going to go ahead and keep advancing because there's a lot of stuff to get through, and I'm just going to do a quick check on time, and we'll get to some of your other questions as well about deadlines. And so we did have you all sign mentor expectations. Please review this, right? Support the student, mentor the student, ensure they're certified, reinforce our policies, and we'll kind of go over some of the expectations. Acknowledge support. So if you are publishing or the student is presenting related to this research project, we have our logo on our website, as well as we do invite you to acknowledge the support of the Office of Undergraduate Research. We encourage you to devise a schedule with your mentee, and then review the bi-monthly emails from Cindy. Not required, but we do invite you to serve as a reviewer if you have time and capacity for our symposia. And then you've already completed the mentor reference, so that's no worries there. So your students have already received information about pay, about onboarding, about withdrawal processes, about being supported, and other opportunities. And so one of the things that they are required to do, and so just as a reminder to all of you, is in this semester, they are required to attend 2 education series events. This is educational content, learning beyond the classroom. It's an hour session. Workshops are wonderful. We have on-demand content that you can find, from writing an abstract to live events, such as we're going to have an undergraduate research mentor panel, as well as some other really dynamic events that Shelley organizes on behalf of the office. And so just want to remind you that your students do have to attend those 2 events. Cindy will be reminding them. So don't, know that the office is sending them little gentle reminders. And by the office, I mean Cindy. The other requirement that your mentees have is the undergraduate research symposia. They are required to present at least once by the time they graduate. If the student has questions about this, you are not required to be the conduit of asking all questions about the requirements. Please encourage them to directly contact the office, because we are happy to answer their specific questions. But we want to remind you that our spring symposium is April 2nd, and that the deadline to register is March 9th. Is that correct, Cindy? It's still March 9th. Okay. And so what we really encourage you to do though, so Cindy will be sending all kinds of reminders. Encourage your mentee to read their emails first. And then secondly, review their content of their poster. One of the things that we always feel really sad for is when a mentee prints out their poster, and then it turns out that they did not acknowledge their mentor or acknowledge the right other things that they should have been acknowledging, didn't cite things, or it's not organized as the mentor would expect. And so really encourage you to work with your mentee, ask them to have you review it before they print it, and all of that. One of the things you should know is the reason why our deadline's so early is because we have poster prizes. And so we will be doing a call. Shelley will be sending out an email for invitation for people to be reviewers of the poster prizes. And we will award them during the symposium and then acknowledge them again during our annual awards ceremony. And so just wanted to give folks really fun highlight about that. As far as the scheduling of it, is that students can choose their time. Shelley's really good at ensuring that there's multiple time options for the students to present. And so there is that as part of the expectations. Does anyone have questions about the symposium? Great. So keep going. They also do have to do a final report, and it's due the last day of classes. They get an email from Cindy. You also have a separate final report that we send to our faculty. This information is part of our annual report. It's how we continue to justify why we should continue to receive money for this program. And we share this with many administrators as well as donors. And so I just want to encourage you all to not forget to fill out the Undergraduate Research Opportunity Program annual report. The other question that I see is if a student presents at another conference or workshop, does it satisfy the requirement to present at our symposium? No, they must present at our undergraduate research symposium. We think that students should have more opportunities to disseminate their research. So if you have them present at other symposia, that is fabulous. You are highly encouraged to do that, but your mentee, to fulfill their requirements for UROP, must present at our symposia. So some of the things we just want to highlight, and we do have some new updates. I'll start with the faculty opportunities. You all are faculty affiliates, and for our graduate students, we do have a few, is that if you're a graduate student, then you are an affiliate and not technically faculty, because you're not faculty, but you are an affiliate. And so we encourage you to check out your profiles. Cindy will send you after this meeting a link to update your profile. If you're like, hey, that doesn't look like how it should look. Please do update it. Otherwise, it will look how it looks until you update it for us. You tell us what it needs to look like. It's a way that students can find you by your colleges. And so we really encourage you to do that. Some of the things we want to remind you about is, in addition, including your students in your, well, now we're going to have a new system of faculty updates, but I'll be working with Office for Faculty to make sure that there's an easy way to include your mentees and all of that. And so please update your faculty profiles to include your mentees. One thing we want to remind you, if you're teaching a class that includes research, is to invite the office to present to your class, if that would be helpful. We are happy to talk about our opportunities. But if you want to present it on our behalf, we're happy to send you some slides too. We love it when people want to do that. We've had some faculty who do that. And so, yeah, that's totally fine too. And include the education series in your course content as supplemental materials. And so that's some of the things, and we'll talk more about other opportunities for your students in a minute. So I know there's some questions already coming about the undergraduate research scholar designation. We'll get there in just a minute. But one thing I do want to share with you all is that if you are applying for grants, we really want you to be successful. We can't fund all the students to do research with our faculty. So if you're applying for NSF or NIH or what have you, you name it, you're applying for it. And it would strengthen your application to have a letter of collaboration or a letter of support. Just know that I am very happy to write letters. Please do reach out to me directly and we can work on that. We also have program partners. And so for those that have more robust teams, we have examples of Happiest as well as Wilk Scholars that we unfold more deeply into our programming. And so just want to encourage you to connect with me or the office if you'd like to partner to receive a letter of support. We also can't write all the grant applications. And you are the experts in your research area. But some of the things that you should also know is that we have a database for students to find you. So if you have your own funding opportunities, we encourage you to have students find you with the Find a Research Opportunity, as well as if you don't have funding, it's also where you can connect with students and let them know that they can apply for UROP as well. I want to remind folks about our annual awards ceremony. The deadline for colleges to submit their nominations is February 15th. So your colleges should already be collecting nomination letters for research mentors. So you as faculty are mentoring students for the Outstanding Undergraduate Research Mentor Awards, as well as for your students, the Outstanding Undergraduate Researcher Award. So I encourage you to connect with your college contact. If you don't know who they are, please, you can either connect with your chair or you can connect with me, and I'm happy to let you know who is your college contact. So then that way you can figure out what is the appropriate process for getting those letters in. And so when you visit our page, we revamped it when I first started. I really redid the entire website with the team. You'll find that it's very much easily organized for getting started, finding a mentor, finding funding, the research database. Some of our other opportunities is a summer program for undergraduate research. If you are faculty and interested in being a faculty mentor, we encourage you to watch out for a deadline in October. And please just know that if you weren't selected this time, it's just keep trying again. We encourage you to try again, as well as just know that your student deadline is January 26th. And so it's highly encouraged that your students connect with other opportunities on campus. And so for those that have been selected for the faculty projects, it is now open for students to apply to work with them. The deadline is January 26th. We have a range of scholarships that Cindy sends out to the listservs. And so I encourage you to have your students read their emails because it's really sad when a student is wondering if they can apply for UROP and they're no longer eligible, but they would have been eligible for a scholarship and they missed the deadline. We regularly send out messages to our listservs about the Francis Family Fund, as well as the Parent Fund. As well as we have travel and small grants and $500 for travel, up to $500 for travel, up to $500 for small grants. And it is very competitive, but we encourage your students to apply for those opportunities, and they're considered on a monthly basis. And if you're curious about where the low times is, if you can imagine where there is not as many conferences happening, that's probably the lower time where they're more likely to get awarded than not. But if they are going to a conference and it is generally a competitive time for conference, you should know that it will most likely be competitive for travel and small grants. We unfortunately can't fund everyone that applies. We are limited by the scope of our funds. We have 2 prizes that we really want to remind you about. If your student is doing any kind of writing on social change, they should be submitting for the Monson Prize. It is how much money, Cindy? $1,500? And we are going to award 2 students this coming award cycle. So please have your students apply for this opportunity. It is an essay prize. They can submit an abstract and a working paper, and then the final paper, after they've been selected, a revised paper is due to the office. And I believe it's by April 1st. Is that correct, Cindy? Or yes. And so really very exciting opportunity. We are very excited to also share that we have another award opportunity called the Valadian Venkatasan Research Award. And this is an annual award that recognizes undergraduates who demonstrate performance of research focused on substantially or substantially involving real world problems. And so we are really excited for this new opportunity. It is a $1,000 award, and it is made thanks to an alumnus of the University of Utah's engineering program. And that deadline is also March 1st. So those are some of the opportunities for your students. They can also check out the research database. But one thing I really want to remind you about is the research scholar designation. This shows up in your mentees' transcripts. So please do not forget to remind your mentee to apply for this. If they've done 2 semesters of research, which this semester would count if they have previous work they've been doing with you, even if it wasn't funded, it doesn't have to be funded research. It could be independent research. It could have been they were working in your labs. It could have been they are working one-on-one with you. There's a variety of ways that faculty work with mentees before they're awarded for the UROP, which is why many of you were successful, because you already had built a partnership with that student even before the semester started. And so we encourage you to remind your student about the scholar designation. Cindy's also told them about it. The deadline is in February, and we have deadlines every fall and spring, but if they want to show up in the convocation, which is very fancy, we get to see all their names, and so does their family. The deadline is in February. Cindy, when is the deadline in February?
February 10th for the early deadline, or the last day of class for the final deadline for spring.
Yeah, and the final deadline in spring is last day of class. For that one, it will show up in their transcript no matter what. They just won't get their name showing up on some pretty convocations website. So, but we do love the early one. So please encourage them to do the early. Do folks have questions about this or anything I've talked about so far? Cindy, did we answer all the questions, or is there any questions I did not get to?
Yeah, I think we did. We did the one question regarding the travel grants and small grants. I don't know if we want to throw that out there. The ASUU is no longer funding students for travel. So if mentors can just be aware of that, and if they can find additional funding maybe in the college office or the dean's office. But yeah, don't send them to ASUU anymore, unfortunately.
So the 2 semesters is just 2 semesters of research, Louisa. So it doesn't matter if it's UROP, if it's SPUR, if it's it doesn't even include, maybe your student never did UROP, but they did 2 semesters of research on our students, or they did independent research with you because they were working in your lab. It literally is you vouching and saying that they had intensive 2 semesters research with you. And so it can look very different, but they are not required to have done UROP or SPUR. It just makes it easier for them to be, because they're already getting this information, so they're more likely to know about it. And so a student who did SRI and maybe worked in an NSF REU totally would be eligible, right? And one of the other criteria is that they must publish in Range, the undergraduate research journal. Now, if you have proprietary information for your data and all of that, then have them work on more of a research reflection or a research abstract. We accept a range of submissions from abstracts to full-length thesis. And we encourage a thesis if the student knows that that thesis will never be seen by anyone else, because you want to have a readership. So it's encouraged that they might think about us as their outlet. So for the Range Journal, it is with UEN Pressbooks, and so it is archived with the library and recirculated through UEN Network, so the Utah Education Network. And so we really highly encourage you to have your student mentees submit to Range Journal, and they will then fulfill their requirements. They do not have to publish at the time of trying to receive the undergraduate research scholar designation. Just submit, because our publication time periods are in July and December. So it is a little off cycle. They just need to submit. When they submit, you receive an automatic email if you are their mentor that they've designated for their Range submission that they've submitted. If you need to see it, just let the office know. If the student never sent it to you, then we can send you what they submitted. One of the things we also want to remind folks about is that we provide research advising for your students to drop in Funding Fridays if they're applying for any of our opportunities, from travel and small grants, SPUR, UROP renewal, you name it. We encourage you to have your students drop into Funding Fridays, which this semester they're 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. We also encourage you, if your student mentee is working with human subjects and they need to be IRB trained, that they drop into IRB Lab. Our student runs the IRB Lab, and it's a more of a student-to-student connection, so it's not as intense, it's not as overwhelming as like going into the IRB application. That if you've applied for IRB, you know it's not the most accessible platform, and so it's a bureaucracy, and so it really helps having a student connect with a student. We encourage your students to drop into that just to get the support and any questions they might not know that they can ask. And the student can also always encourage them. Our mentee always encourages them. Our undergraduate research leader, always encourages them when to really think about bringing it up to the faculty and mentor and how. And so we don't leave you out of the chain of communication. It just becomes additional support for your mentee. We also do individual mentoring. And so if your student wants to meet with the office, a member of the OUR team, they can schedule with research advising. And so that is the slides. And we are at 2 minutes to the hour. I'm sorry, I promised maybe letting you out early, and look at that. I'm so chatty. I took up the whole time. I just want to make sure before we stop, is any questions that we didn't answer, things coming up for you? It's a lot of information. Please, reach out if anything comes up for you. And we know, I want to thank our returning mentors, and I want to thank our new mentors. We really can't do the work without you. We're here to support you. We encourage you to have your students. They don't need to be funded by the office to be on our listserv. So please encourage your students to join the listserv, as well as our faculty. And we will update this because we also have my Emma communications that we send out. So students can easily, as well as faculty and staff, can sign up. If you have staff that are working in your teams, encourage them to also sign up for our faculty and staff and graduate student listserv if they want to receive updates as well. And so with that, we will give you your 1 minute and we will stay on if you have any questions. So we'll hang out if you have questions and we'll answer those individualized questions. But for now, we'll just let the rest of you go. And I just want to thank you. And Cindy will be following up. Watch out for her communication. She's a wonderful human being and she's very funny too. So please respond to her.